When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to effect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new gods for their future security.
I'm Leslie Green Bowman, president of the Thomas Jefferson Foundation, here at Monticello. You've just heard a former justice of the Supreme Court of Virginia, the Honorable John Charles Thomas, read the preamble to the Declaration of Independence, which he has done at this place on this day for 30 years. Usually, Judge Thomas speaks to a large audience gathered here on the West Lawn. Thousands come to witness an annual naturalization ceremony conducted by the United States District Court for the Western District of Virginia. On a normal 4th of July, 75 or 80 people would soon take the oath of American citizenship on the steps of the West Portico, just behind me. A keynote speaker would honor their accomplishments and welcome them into our nation. Past speakers have included presidents, secretaries of state, Supreme Court justices, and cultural icons. They too have been honored to speak at Monticello on a holiday Jefferson described as the only birthday I ever commemorate, that of our independence. I don't need to tell you that this year is different. In the midst of a global health crisis, we have reimagined this event so that we can bring the power of place at Monticello and an all-star lineup of speakers to you in your homes. But this year stands out for reasons beyond the empty lawn. The 4th is a celebration of the principles enshrined in the Declaration of Independence, drafted by a young Thomas Jefferson and adopted on this very date in 1776. For Black Americans and other marginalized communities, liberty and equality, the legacies of the Declaration, are too often challenged by the legacies of slavery. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. George Floyd's death was a denial of that self-evident truth. As a country, we are once again confronting the malignant persistence of systemic racism. And on the grounds of this plantation, where Jefferson enslaved hundreds of people, the arc of history is palpable on the landscape. Each year, on this day, we acknowledge the paradox of Monticello, that Jefferson, a lifelong slaveholder, gave our nation a mission statement about freedom and equality that changed the course of human history. Freedom movements here and around the world have long adopted the Declaration as their rallying cry. Dr. King invoked the document on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, calling us to pay on its promissory note in the midst of a struggle for civil rights that continues to this day. Lincoln himself quoted its promise of equality in the Gettysburg Address, delivered in the throes of the Civil War. And that great abolitionist, Frederick Douglass, in a decades-long fight to end slavery, described the Declaration as a statement of saving principles. 2 centuries later, we are still grappling with slavery's legacies and still struggling to write them with Jefferson's words. In a new book released today, Pulitzer Prize-winning historian John Meacham has crafted a pocket manual on citizenship, direct from the pen of Monticello's architect. John captures Jefferson's continued relevance. He was the best and the worst of us. He believed in a dynamic kind of citizenship, a nation that could be reinvented by each generation. He preferred the dreams of the future to the history of the past. Produced in partnership with Monticello, the book is called In the Hands of the People, and it is essential reading for us today. Among its contributors is a second Pulitzer Prize-winning historian, Annette Gordon-Reed. Annette is the celebrated author of The Hemingses of Monticello, which transformed our understanding of Sally Hemings, her family, and their life on and off this mountain. In this new book, she reminds us that every group that has sought equality in the United States has relied on Jefferson's words to make the case for inclusion. For more on the power of those words today, it's my privilege to welcome John Meacham and Annette Gordon-Reed.
Honored to be here with my friend and colleague, Annette Gordon-Reed, who is the most decorated historian of our time and also the nicest. So it's particularly annoying in many ways. Annette, Jefferson, the most complicated of figures, seen as problematic in many quarters. What is it that he can teach us now?
He's in some ways, and this has been said a lot, sort of the embodiment of America in a way. The best of things, the worst of things all together right there at the start. And you can kind of figure out the problems we're going to have based upon the problems that are seen in his life. And you can think about the good things that have happened, the ways that we've achieved through looking at his life and looking at his action. So he's a template in a way for us, and it's a way to engage a lot of really tough issues.
And part of the reason we did this book for the foundation, or with the foundation, was it's the obligation of a citizen, not just of historians, to appreciate that complexity.
Yeah.
Because that's the nature of, as citizens, we're charged with rendering judgments about those very complex people in real time. I don't think there's anything more American than the fact that Dr. King and Thomas Jefferson now basically stare at each other across the tidal basin, in perpetuity. And to me, that makes sense.
I think that's what the fourth is about, thinking about how citizens, we're part of this. How do citizens make these ideals real?
To me, the fourth in particular is about the unifying nature of that complexity. The reason Jefferson resonates is because he articulated a universal ideal, even though he did not apply it universally. But that's the nature of an ideal, right? And so he established a vernacular of liberty.
the tension that you see in him is the tension, as I was suggesting before, of the country, and it's a tension that we shouldn't lose. I mean, there's something valuable about that struggle that you're never complacent. You never think that you've reached perfection. You never think that everything is okay. It's not a Hollywood movie. No, there's not supposed to be the character, tying people to the railroad track and the hero and the bad guy and a happy ending. That's not assured. You have to work at this kind of thing. The tensions, the demons that are there, you have to work at that.
Let's spend a minute on Monticello itself, because I think that the house, the grounds, taken fully, is the best kind of monument, because it's not a statue, it's a living place. And you can actually, I think, engage in a way with the reality of the American experience by being there in a way that's even more ambient and illuminating than going to a statue.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can't know about his life without knowing about the lives of the hundreds of people over the course of his life who lived there. People who lived there spent more actual time there than he did. And to see their lives and their struggles and his relationship to them as a person who was an owner of human beings, a person who controlled their lives. You have to see that together, to see all those things together. That's the importance of it. You can't, the statue just shows you him, but the place, when you think about what this is, and I do know sometimes people forget that it was a plantation, that it was, that people were enslaved there. But if you're there thinking, and certainly the people who are guides who take you around, make sure you know that you have to keep these other people in mind as well. One man, but there are many, many stories.
So let's wrap up by answering a version of Frederick Douglass's great question. What is the 4th of July to a person of color, and what is the 4th of July ideally to all of us together? And I can go first, or you can go first.
You go first. A person of the other color.
Everybody, besides reading In the Hands of the People, which is a marvelous book. And Annette and I can say that because we didn't write it. Thomas Jefferson did, and our friend John Regasta at Monticello was essential in the project. To me, the 4th is, to borrow a phrase from Dr. King, it is a promissory note that is significantly overdue. And we have told people who look like me, have told ourselves for 244 years or so that we were engaged in this world-changing event dedicated to an idea of liberty and equality, to a moral truth, as opposed to simply an economic or political or territorial one. That is the story we have told ourselves. And the country, the eras that are significantly better than others are the eras where we have come closer to actually acting on that narrative, as opposed to using it as a narcotic or an antidepressant or cover for eras in which we have not even tried to live up to.
One of the things that historians do, and I try to do, is we talk about truths that are pleasant and those that are unpleasant. And the 4th is, for me, a mixed bag. It's a mixed celebration. We've been talking about Juneteenth, which may likely become the next national holiday just a few weeks before the 4th. And thinking of them together, the order that was read down in Galveston on June 19th, 1865, talks about equality. The thing that now it suggests that Black people are free, and that equality is going to be the thing of the future, the present and the future. And of course, we know that didn't happen. Even at that particular moment, we're still working on that. But even in the document that freed African Americans purportedly, this notion of equality is put there because that's the crux of the matter. When you don't think other human beings are of equal humanity, you can do anything. That voice that you talked about, the voice doesn't tell you the right thing to do if you're dealing with people whom you don't see as your fellow human beings. And the Declaration, those words invite us to really contemplate that. How much do we believe this? How do we make ourselves to believe this? Because we're not going to reach our potential, begin to reach our potential as a country until we accept that.
Seems to me that, and you and I have talked about this 1,000 times, to go exactly to what you just said, it is a day for high-minded idealism. But remember how Thomas Jefferson spent his working life, and that was as a politician, and trying to manufacture consensus to address the problems of the day for a given period of time, which is, in fact, I think, a pretty good working definition of politics. And it seems to me that closing the gap between what Jefferson thought of as self-evident truths and what is the evident truth of people's daily lives is the work of the fourth, and, as Jefferson would say, every other day of the year.
Yeah. It's a day to commemorate. It's a day to pay homage to what happened at that time, and certainly the document that's given us words that mean something, not just in America, but all over the world. It's come to mean something, and it doesn't have to be centered on whether you like him or not. I mean, that's the thing that historians too. This is the other way we can approach a subject without this need to love or hate the individual. And I know that there's a temptation for us to think that it's all about the personal is political, and to like Jefferson's ideals or to accept the importance of them means that you have to be in love with him. And that's not the case. It's about the role that this person played in the world and the contributions, and the Declaration, and along with the other revolutionaries. He didn't make July 4th possible all by himself, but as the pen of the revolution, he had a role in making us think about what the country said it stood for. And it's our responsibility to make sure that that actually comes to fruition, that we uphold that value.
Annette Gordon-Reed.
John Meacham.
Thank you, John and Annette. If you've spent previous Independence Days here at Monticello, you know that one of the highlights of our annual ceremony is when the presiding judge invites new citizens to speak. Over more than 50 years, 4,000 people have sworn their oath of allegiance here on the West Lawn, and many of them stepped up to the mic to share their thoughts. Spectators often tell us that even more than hot dogs and fireworks, these reflections on the meaning of citizenship are their favorite part of Independence Day. This year, in the absence of a naturalization ceremony, we went back through our archives and put together a compilation of new citizens' remarks. I think you will find them moving and meaningful as we consider what it means to be an American citizen today.
I've always felt this like home, and I am so happy and so excited I can finally really call America home.
I came to this country from Iran. My parents brought me here when I was a child, and I'd just like to say a word to honor my parents who, like many, many millions of immigrants before, gave up everything to come to this country. They gave up their home, their language, everything they were to bring me here and to build a new life. They gave this country so much, and they've received a lot too. So I'd like to say a particular word to honor my parents. And it feels wonderful to be an American. It's an honor and a joy to be here. Thank you.
The meaning to freedom and equality has value in this country.
I'm learning my rights and knowing who I am and what I want to become. Because of my mother, I choose a career that will help not only me, but people outside of my family. And I'm grateful for that. And thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to stand here and enjoy this moment with everybody else.
I just have a few words that would express my feelings, and that is that I feel humbled, I feel honored, I feel thankful, and I feel very blessed. And God save America.
I've been crying since I got here, so I'm very happy and joyful that I finally did it, and I'm very happy that I did it.
I've been here for 13 years. I'm really blessed and honored to become a citizen, and I feel really lucky to be here.
I came to the United States from Ukraine when I was 17. And I really didn't know what's going to happen or how my life is going to turn out to be. And I'm just very proud and honored to be here today. I have met very incredible people along the way, people who were kind, supportive, encouraging, people who believed in me, and people who just resonate love. And I'm just so grateful for those people, many of whom are here today.
I was living in Kuwait, and I attended the Gulf War. Me and my daughter, my wife, and my daughters and my son. We stay in the basement 42 days until the Gulf War finished. And then I moved to Iraq, to Baghdad, and I make a successful business. And then another war happened, and I lost everything again. And then I joined U.S. Army as a translator, and I get my freedom. And with you and with these people, I am very happy, sir, and I'm free now for the first time in my life.
I just want to say thank you, because I've had this dream to come to the United States since I was 16, and I feel today is the day. It took me 19 years to achieve this dream, but today I feel like I can accomplish it, and I'm so happy that I'm part of this nation, and I'm proudly to say that this is home now. Thank you.
There is nothing quite like experiencing this holiday through the eyes of a new citizen. And now, as is our tradition, we invite you to enjoy the perspective of our keynote speaker with his own immigrant story to share. Through his efforts to feed millions of Puerto Ricans following Hurricane Maria, and more recently to assist those facing food insecurity as a result of COVID-19, Chef José Andrés has become a household name. Originally from Spain, he took his own oath of American citizenship in 2013 and has since been a tireless advocate for immigration reform. On this date, 6 years ago, President Obama named him the year's Outstanding American by Choice. Chef Andrés is an internationally recognized culinary innovator, a New York Times best-selling author, and a dedicated philanthropist. He's the owner of Think Food Group, a collective of nearly 30 restaurants, and the founder of World Central Kitchen, a nonprofit that delivers food relief in the wake of natural and humanitarian disasters. World Central Kitchen has served more than 20 million meals worldwide. The chef has a Jeffersonian passion for good food and global citizenship. Ladies and gentlemen, Chef José Andrés.
My fellow Americans, this is a very special day for you and our country. It's not the celebration we were hoping for, but we will gather with friends and family on the next July 4th to celebrate the best of this great country of ours. And some of you will proudly raise your hands and take the oath of citizenship in your own naturalization ceremonies. For me, becoming an American citizen in 2013 was one of the proudest days of my life. I arrived here to America as an immigrant, a young cook with $50 in my pocket many decades ago. America has given me the opportunity to open new restaurants, raise 3 Spanish beautiful American daughters, meet my wife Patricia, and serve in the fight against hunger. You new American citizens, you have new opportunities too. You are, in many ways, the new ingredients of this nation, the new ideas and the new energy that will move America forward. But even as we build a better future, we should also learn from the past, because American history shapes our lives today. As a chef and a citizen, I am fascinated by the way food tells our story. Here in America, our food often tells the forgotten stories of those who came before us. People who brought the best of the world to the heart of America. Thomas Jefferson is known to history as an intellectual man, a sophisticated leader with the finest tastes and an incredible garden. He entertained with fancy diners. He was a wine expert, an importer of olive oil, a lover of vegetables. But it is only recently that we truly acknowledge how much of this reputation of his was created by his enslaved cook, Mr. James Hemings. When Jefferson became the ambassador to France, Hemings traveled with him to study French cooking. After 3 years of training in the most sophisticated techniques of the time, Hemings became chef de cuisine at the American Embassy on the Champs-Élysées. He cooked for politicians, artists, scientists, and aristocrats. Also, he earned his own salary and spent part of his money on his own French tutor. He could have paid a lawyer to become a free man, but he reluctantly returned to America, again as a slave, with his sister Sally, who was pregnant with Jefferson's child, just a few months after the start of the French Revolution. He came back to Monticello with a promise from Jefferson of his freedom, but only if he trained his successor. This isn't just a story about chefs or about ancient history. It's a story about how this country, its past and its future, it's built by people whose own stories have been ignored for too long. Jefferson himself said, "The care of human life and happiness, and not their destruction, is the first and only object of good government." Today, we need our government officials to understand our history and our future, so they take care of human life and happiness for all Americans. They need to take care of Black lives and Black happiness. Jefferson did not live up to his own words, but he was right about this. The first and only object of good government is to protect life and happiness. Today, we know that too many Black men are being killed by our own police, our own government. The people that are supposed to take care of us are not doing so at times. To change that, to hold true to Jefferson's vision, your voice needs to join the voices that demand justice and fairness. New Americans and old Americans need to demand that all people are treated as equal, not just on a paper, but in real life. To be silent today is to join the forces of oppression. We all need to speak up for our American values, to speak up for fairness, and to speak up for what it is right. Speak up so people can breathe free once and for all. I found my voice for freedom when I started volunteering at DC Central Kitchen, a nonprofit with a mission of not wasting food, and more important, not wasting people. In the process of feeding our city, we trained people with important skills. We gave them the same chance to belong that we enjoy. The founder of DC Central Kitchen, Robert Egger, taught me that charity is too often about the redemption of the giver, when it should be about the liberation of the receiver. So, with this phrase in my mind, I started a new nonprofit, World Central Kitchen, to feed the hungry around the world, to liberate the receiver, whatever disaster strikes. This great country has given the world and immigrants like you and me so much. But it's also a struggle to give everything it promises to everyone. Jefferson gave us our ideas of American liberty, while denying liberty to the chef who fed him and entertained his guests. We are here in America not just to redeem ourselves, but to create a system that offers liberation for all. That, to me, is the definition of the new American dream in the 21st century. Provide for others what you will hope to provide for yourself. Work as hard for those you don't know as for those you do. What makes you American is not a birth certificate or a passport, but your actions and the values you strive to uphold. What makes you American is your contribution to your communities, to society. What makes you American is working hard for those who come after you. During this pandemic, we have seen the true meaning of essential workers. And quite often, essential workers are immigrants, Americans by choice. They work as teachers and as cooks. They work in the fields and in the hospitals. Some are researching vaccines to the COVID-19 virus. Others are keeping our supermarkets stocked because at the end of the day, immigrants like you and me, we are here to help build bridges, bringing solutions, contributing. And if we are to move forward together, we must have stronger bridges, not longer lines. Shorter walls and longer tables. As a new citizen, you have great opportunities and also great responsibilities. One of those duties is to care for the people who dream of being like you. Too many dreamers live in this country in fear of deportation. Too many undocumented workers live in fear of government, even while they sacrifice for this country through this pandemic. You, the lucky citizens of this country, must speak up for them. We all must speak up on their behalf. You cannot be silent if you want to be a true American citizen. At my naturalization ceremony in 2013, my wife and I were told that America expects us to bring the best of who we are from the countries we came from, and to make that part of America's rich DNA. We were told that to become an American was to become an active citizen, to speak up, not to be silent, to exercise our rights, like the right to vote. We must all wake up each day knowing where we come from and where we are going. Be proud of who you are and where you belong. Work hard to keep building the America that Jefferson's described. Work hard to build an America where Mr. James Hemings is celebrated. Work hard for an America where immigrants are treasured and the door to immigration is open. Work hard for the America we all dream of. Happy Independence Day, and congratulations, my fellow Americans.
Thank you, Chef Andres, for that eloquent and personal message. As our nation turns 244, I want you also to celebrate a woman who turns 100 today and who has deep connections to Monticello. Mrs. Velma Williams is the great-great-granddaughter of another famous chef who cooked right here in Monticello's kitchens, Peter Hemings. Peter was one of very few American chefs trained in French cooking, learned from his brother James, the first American chef de cuisine to be trained in Paris. But Peter and his brother James Hemings were enslaved. They belonged to Thomas Jefferson. They were the sons of Elizabeth Hemings, the family matriarch, and the brothers of Sally Hemings. After Jefferson's death, a relative purchased Peter Hemings' freedom, and he spent the remainder of his days working as a tailor in Charlottesville. Across generations, the Hemings family has shown a relentless commitment to education and global citizenship, and Peter Hemings' descendant, Velma Williams, is no exception. A longtime teacher, first of third grade, then of high school, she speaks German, French, and Spanish, and has traveled throughout the country and around the world. Mrs. Williams only recently learned of her connections to Monticello. She has since been interviewed by our Getting Word Oral History Project, which preserves the history of the enslaved families who lived and labored here. On this milestone birthday, we have invited Mrs. Williams to reflect on history, family, and the meaning of this holiday. She'll be interviewed by none other than Annette Gordon-Reed, a foremost scholar on the Hemings family, who, as I mentioned, won the Pulitzer Prize for her book, The Hemingses of Monticello. They began their conversation by talking about Velma's childhood in New York City.
You mentioned your father. He called you what?
Sis Biddy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What did he mean to you? What was his name?
His name was Everett. And was an orphan child.
Mhm.
He had been orphaned when he was, I guess, maybe 7 or 8 years old.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
so he was passed around from person to person. And he must have decided that that wouldn't happen to his children.
Uh-huh.
He was
And
the best dad in the world,
I was going to ask you, were you close to him?
very close to him.
Mhm.
And every Sunday, he took us somewhere. So he took us down to see the beginning of the building of the Empire State Building.
Wow.
So that lets you know how old I am. I watched it grow.
Uh-huh.
And I also watched the Chrysler Building grow.
Mhm.
And then I loved New York City. It had a lot to offer everybody. We were welcome everywhere. Then he took me to the Bronx Zoo, and we talked about the different animals. And he took me to the aquarium. They don't have it anymore in New York City, but the aquarium, and he pointed out the different fish. And he took me to the Museum of Natural History, to the big dinosaur there in the beginning. And he taught me music, To a Wild Rose, and various songs. And he took me to hear Paul, the baritone singer.
Robeson.
Thank you, Marian Anderson. Because although we didn't have money to go into the music hall, the city college had them there, and we paid 25 cents for a cushion to sit on. And we were way up those steps. But we heard it.
Uh-huh.
And he just made magic for me.
Uh-huh. And your mother, what was her name?
My mother's name was Sally, but he called her Jean after his mother.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So she was the homemaker supreme. All of my friends were welcome. And even though it was the Depression, there was always enough for whoever I brought home.
Mhm.
And it all made me very happy. And aunts and uncles leaving the farm in Virginia didn't have a job in New York City. They were surprised how hard it was. So they moved in with us. And pretty soon we had half a dozen aunts and uncles living with us. And they were sweet, and they had stories. And they told me all kinds of wonderful things. And they had ideas and ideals. And so there were books in school, and they were the human beings, the lovely ones, the loved ones for me at home. I was a very happy child.
We also spoke about the time Velma spent in Ghana with her husband, Ralph, who served as military attaché to the new nation's American embassy. She remembers taking off from New York's JFK airport on the same night in 1963 that family members boarded a bus to attend the March on Washington.
The last overseas trip was to Africa.
Uh-huh. And when was that?
When was it? 1963.
Ah.
And it was a remarkable night. The night we left, we were on the plane. It would be nonstop. I didn't want to go. I was already in graduate school. It would be my first and last chance, I thought. And I was becoming a teacher. I was in education, and I was enjoying it. And I didn't want to leave, but they said we would be diplomats, and he would be the United States military attaché to Ghana. So I sat on the plane, and I thought what irony it was that I did not want to go there. This is where my ancestors came from 200, maybe 300 years ago. And I wondered if the gene I carried, was it from a male who didn't come home and they wondered what happened to him that night? Was it from somebody's mother? She had been out gathering food and she didn't come home. And I thought of all the possibilities. And I grieved. I thought, here I am now, 200-300 years after that. I'm going back dressed in a pale green silk suit, high-heeled shoes. I probably, 200 years ago, had something around my waist and a cloth, and bare feet. I couldn't speak anything but my native dialect. And I was going back now. I could speak French, German, Spanish, English. I was in a silk suit. I could get along. I knew how to manage. And it's ironic that a slave who knew nothing would, several generations later, go back as a diplomat. That's an unheard of thing.
Yeah.
I had to leave my 16-year-old son, which was a wrench, but he was too old to come. My daughter was 9 years old, but he was 16. He would graduate without us, cried every night. And I learned a lot about people because although we had come a long way, there were parts of the world that had not. And that was an eye-opener for me. Also, my parents had been married to other people who were light, and through the years, they began to look white. They passed for white when it was convenient. But they were black inside, and the night that we left was the night that they were boarding Greyhound buses to drive to Washington, D.C. to hear Martin Luther King's speech that would change life for blacks.
That's when you left? That happened the same time that you were leaving?
At the same time. And it's the wheels of my mind. The wheels of that plane were going to take off and take me where we came from originally. And the wheels of that Greyhound bus would take those of us who had changed beyond anything our original folks would know. They were going, and they looked white, they were going to fight for blacks. I'm a black going to the land we came from. I think it's ironic. And I would be going as a diplomat in an exalted position. And that was quite a time. And I learned a lot there too.
When did you first learn about your connection to Monticello? And you visited Monticello, right?
I have now, and I knew of it, but I had never seen it until just maybe 5 years ago. My cousin Ruth loved to go to Monticello, and everybody had talked about the people who made Monticello famous, and Jefferson and Sally Hemings and all that. So I found it exciting. That was very interesting to hear, something I didn't know at all before. And, the last time I went, there was a big reunion, and I had never seen so many people at a reunion. And they were people of every color, shape, complexion. They were from everywhere, and there was camaraderie and warmth and something pleasant, and it was almost spiritual because we didn't know each other, and yet everybody felt close, both whites and blacks. I hadn't seen that before. The new experience for me.
So it's the 4th of July.
Yes.
And, happy birthday to you. What wish do you have for the 4th?
It's the wish I think that most of us would have, that we hope there'll be peace and harmony and within and without our family, that my children will be as happy as I've been. And I hope they will be productive as I hope I was earlier when I worked for the government.
Well, that's a lovely wish. I think you're right. That's what everybody's hoping for, is harmony and peace among people.
Happy 100th birthday. I thought we might let John Meacham and his new book have the last word. He closes his introduction with a letter from Jefferson to John Adams, penned in 1821.
I shall not die without a hope that light and liberty are on steady advance. The flames kindled on the 4th of July, 1776, have spread over too much of the globe to be extinguished by the feeble engines of despotism. On the contrary, they will consume these engines and all who work them.
John leaves us with this thought. That work is now our work. Let us commit our hands and our hearts to the task of keeping those flames alive, so that all may one day walk in their light. A happy Independence Day to all of you. We're glad that you could join us for this virtual July 4th at Monticello. Thanks to our speakers, to the citizens, Judge John Charles Thomas, and of course to John Meacham, Annette Gordon-Reed, Chef Andrés, and Velma Williams. Thanks as well to the sponsors who make this event possible each year, whether on site or online. And a special thank you to Charlottesville's own world-class jazz trumpeter, John Dirth, whose music has made this day so memorable at Monticello.